From the New Scientist Labs, it's Janine Young with Wammo on Kiwi.
Live from New Scientist Laboratories in Melbourne City, it is Janine Young this morning. Good morning, Janine.
Good morning, Wammo.
And you won't be able to tell right now, but I'm sitting on my knees this morning in the studio.
Are you being ergonomic?
Maybe I am. For some reason this morning I had to take off my shoes and socks. I just couldn't stand to have shoes and socks on today.
Are you anticipating the arrival of summer?
I could be.
I think you might be a little optimistic, certainly given the weather we've had here recently. I would imagine.
And here as well.
Yeah, I was going to say you wouldn't be a lot better.
No.
Well, whatever makes you happy, my friend.
Okay, all right. Just I thought I'd let you in on what's happening here, but anyway.
Well, if I was watching the feed by now, I'd probably know, but I'm sorry I didn't, and I'm not. But I promise I will.
Okay, well, do tell us about diseases you never knew you could catch.
I love this story. This one I got right into this week. It's the idea that infections, whether they be viral or bacterial, can underlie a bunch of diseases that we've never considered might have an underlying infectious cause before. We know that things like cervical cancer are caused in a large number of cases by infection with a herpes-type virus. And that's what the vaccine Gardasil, which has been out for a couple of years now, I've got to get very proud here, by a guy called Ian Fraser. He's from the University of Queensland. He's wonderful. He was responsible for that. And that idea underlies a few other of these things.
Yeah.
It sounds a bit controversial, the idea that obesity could in fact have a basis in some kind of infection is a bit odd, but in the 1980s there was a guy called Nikhil Durahanda, and he was in Bombay. He noticed that there was a chicken virus that had the unusual side effect of making the birds obese. And this is down to an adenovirus, and they tend to cause common colds in people.
Huh.
So he decided, naturally enough, to take a look at whether or not there were any kind of indications in people.
Yeah.
And he found that there's one in particular called AD36, adenovirus 36, that could make animals, including chickens, mice, and marmosets. I don't know why he picked marmosets, but it made them obese. They packed on a whole bunch of weight. He found that 30% of obese people had antibodies to this AD36. And that indicates that they've encountered the virus, but that's only 4% of people who have a normal body weight, who are quite lean. So that's fairly circumstantial. He hasn't been able to find the absolute proof that this has happened. But in speculating, they've found 8 other viruses that have been linked with obesity in different animals, and they think that it could have to do with the fact that viruses often slow down your metabolic rate. They've also found in this case that the adenovirus can suppress a hormone called leptin, and that puts a brake on fat production. It's all to do with hunger control and the like. And interestingly enough, when the virus is grown in the lab, human stem cells infected with this virus tend to develop into fat cells.
But has he been able to determine, though, what sort of percentage these diseases cause for the result being obesity? How much of that is unhealthy lifestyle versus the disease?
Yeah, that's the thing that they haven't been able to determine. And this is not trying to say that it's all about a virus infecting you and therefore, it's not. But, it provides an interesting thing because there are some people that do have a kind of metabolic obesity, that they try and eat really well, they try and exercise, and they're still obese. That might explain some of those people.
Yeah.
It's not excusing any of these sorts of things because healthy living, and we talk about this probably every second week.
Yeah.
There's no excuse for not eating properly because if you're going to go down and eat Maccas every day, you're going to get fat.
So catching one of these diseases could make you predetermined, but the result is not conclusive. It's not definitely going to happen.
No, as I said, adenoviruses cause the common cold, and it could just be that you get the wrong type. It can be unfortunate that way. You're not to know which is which. It could be any other kind of virus. Diabetes, for example. They're interestingly putting some cases of type 1 diabetes, and that's not the lifestyle one. Type 1 is where your beta cells in your pancreas just give up the ghost. They stop producing insulin. They think that could have some influence under something called Coxsackie B enterovirus, and that is generally responsible for causing diarrhea and vomiting. So it sounds a bit yuck. But they think that this could actually have something to do with it because the protein that produces is remarkably similar to another protein. I won't bore everybody with what it's called, but you get this cross-reactivity, which means that the antibodies recognize this, it's glutamic acid decarboxylase for anybody who cares. Anybody who recognizes this, then it means you get cross-reactivity. So you start getting those cells being destroyed instead of destroying the virus. So it's this cross-reactivity that they're talking about, and they're not 100% sure whether or not it's that or whether somehow this infection alters the beta cells so that the body sees them as foreign. But the ultimate result is the body destroys them and they're no longer producing insulin.
Right.
So they're not saying that all cases are caused by this, but it's certainly an interesting way of looking at it. And it means that if you can find a way to treat them, you can actually start looking at even type 2. They've found that 40% of people with type 2 diabetes contain this virus protein, compared with 13% of controls.
Yeah.
Again, that's a lifestyle thing a lot of the time. But it's sort of suggesting that the virus may impair the ability to secrete insulin. They're not saying that it causes it, and they're not saying that there's an excuse for not eating properly again. But it's something else to consider in the way of being able to look at how to treat these diseases.
Absolutely. Hey, now let's look at another story that's out this week about researchers at the University of Adelaide. They found that the total population size of a species needs to be at least a few thousand in order to prevent extinction.
Yeah, it appears that the people who've been looking at this may in fact be underestimating the risk of extinction because they're not allowing properly for the dangers posed by the loss of genetic diversity. Most people would be aware by now that in order for a species to survive and be robust and healthy and being able to respond to different conditions when they come along, diseases and the like, you need a large number of individuals who have different types of genes. They need to be able to mix up together to be able to get that robustness. And in the past, scientists have said that, you really only need hundreds.
Yeah.
But they're finding now that actually you likely need thousands
right.
to be able to deal with that. The minimum viable population size is the basic unit, if you like, that they talk about, and that's where a species has a 90% chance of surviving the next 100 years. And the way they're looking at it now, in looking at hundreds of individuals, they're actually looking at a short-term kind of maintenance as opposed to long-term prospering. And yeah, it's a bit alarming to think that we may in fact be managing and ultimately they will still die. Yeah,
so if you've got a population of tigers and there's only 50 or so, they're probably stuffed, right?
Yeah. To put it bluntly, yes, very likely. 50 individuals in any population, I don't think anybody would argue would be enough genetic diversity for them to be able to survive on a long-term basis.
Pretty tragic.
But think about 50 people that you know. If you all started having children and your children had children, in no time, you're basically inbred. It's a bit frightening, really.
Hey, isn't that how it started, Adam and Eve?
That's if you believe that kind of thing.
Indeed. Oh, well, that's a bit of a scary story, and I hope that people who manage populations of wild animals or even kept animals start looking at that.
Well, I don't know if New Zealand saw it, but there was a documentary here in Australia a number of weeks ago, changing the subject completely, that was talking about the genetic diversity and physical malformations of breeding dogs, like show dogs. And it was alarming because I think they said that, I think it was a bulldog, where the effective number of individuals who were breeding was like 10.
Yeah.
And they're so inbred.
Yeah. They're
so damaged, and they're so frail as a species. A whole bunch of these dogs have so many problems because they've been bred from small numbers of individuals for the last 10, 15 years.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It's really very alarming because it means that the the health of that species is in serious danger.
Yeah, and the health of each individual. They get health problems as they grow older. Some of them can't walk, and it's just,
absolutely, it was quite an alarming program. And unfortunately, the Breeding Society in the UK was busy saying, no, this is how these dogs should be. They're beautiful. You see before and after pictures of the dogs, and actually, no, I don't think they were. But it's just me. They're certainly not healthy dogs anyway.
Learn to embrace and love the mutt.
Well, yes, mutts are actually very, very healthy in that respect because they do have this genetic diversity. They haven't been inbred for a really long time.
Yeah.
So, and that's the other thing about working dogs. Apparently, they're really very healthy because they're very deliberately kept. So they're outbred quite frequently because they need to do a job. Whereas it's the show dogs that are really not healthy.
Indeed. Well, thanks very much, Janine Young.